Hello. How y'all doing today? Hey, Cooper.
Hey Pete, good morning. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
Hey, Shiva. Hey, Swami.
Peter, we can't hear you.
Oh. Hmm. Can you hear me now?
I think we can all hear you. I'm not sure what his issue is.
Hey, Peter, it's 3 past, so I think we can get started.
Okie dokie. Sounds good.
Okay. So, very good morning to everyone. And uh, so, this is the first call after we basically got rebranded as Connect Secure. And most of you would have seen that Peter has basically taken over the role as CEO of the company. And he's right here on this call. And if you have any questions, you can absolutely basically ask him any of those questions. So, what we will do is that just as we always had, we will essentially go through the product updates, walk through what we are essentially looking at doing in the next couple of weeks. And we will solicit feedback from all of you in terms of what's working, what's not working, and then we'll take it from there. So, Peter, what I will do is I'll just get started on the product updates, and then we can take questions on chat, and people can come on and then basically ask any other questions that they may have.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to basically just quickly switch to slideshow mode here. Okay, so folks, the first call of the new year. So what do we have from a product perspective? So one of the things that essentially came out based on feedback from multiple partners is essentially that now a lot of assets are essentially moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11. However, Windows 11 has a compatibility check that is required in order to basically make sure that you're actually running on hardware that is supported for Windows 11. And so we've essentially kind of looked at all the assets and essentially have a tab in the asset security and compliance overview, which talks about whether you will be able to run Windows 11 and you pass the compatibility check or not. And the most important piece, which we essentially see kind of missing from a lot of folks, is essentially the secure boot and UFI. And if that hardware is not supported, then you essentially have to fix that up. So this essentially is part of the release that's already happened today. So you should be able to see this in your screen. So it has all of these metrics that it basically defines for it to be compatible, and what is the minimum required value. And we also basically present to you what is the actual value, and so basically your compatibility status with this entire piece. So the same thing is available in the form of a report. So you can essentially kind of see the data in terms of a report. So you can see which assets are compatible and not compatible. And by the way, all of the assets which essentially are compatible, you has a special tag attached to it saying Windows 10 compatible, Windows 11 compatible, sorry. And also there is another tag which says Windows 11 incompatible. So you can essentially generate reports filtered by those particular assets based on that particular tag. So this feature is basically live right now. The second is that one of the things that we've started noticing is that a lot of phishing and all of the other issues that are occurring are now slowly basically coming through the extensions and basically the Chrome and browser extensions. And so we these plugins and extensions are something that we're putting it back into asset inventory. So you can actually see what are all the extensions which are in there. In addition to that, we have alerts for if you have installed any plugins which essentially get blacklisted, or there basically is something which says that this plugin is not secure, then we actually will alert you on those pieces. So that alert mechanism has also been integrated in this. This is part of the release that's coming out at the end of this week, but we just wanted to kind of bring this to your notice. The third thing, which is kind of a big thing, that's essentially something that has been in the works for some time, but we've got that right now, is for you to essentially kind of go into a company mapping, which is basically existing or new company mapping. And essentially you can essentially create configurations for all the assets that are in a particular company, right? So if you look at it from a PSA perspective, you can essentially kind of have all of the data that you have within this platform basically moved into the platform. So over here, you can see that we're just showing an example of ConnectWise, but the same works with every other PSA like Hello PSA, etc. So you can essentially see that the configuration type in ConnectWise is defined as Connect Secure. You will see all of the assets in there, and you can search for a particular asset. And for this particular asset, you essentially we've defined a new configuration type called the Connect Secure configuration type. And in this, we have all of the details, including what are the critical network vulnerabilities, what are the medium vulnerabilities, whether it is CIS compliant, cyber HIPAA compliant. All of those metrics basically are in this particular configuration that has been created. And one of the reasons for why we think that this particular thing is extremely useful for most people is, one of the things that we've heard repeatedly from partners is, why can't you guys do an integration with BrightGauge? Now, all of you know that ConnectWise as a company basically has their own time for when they would essentially do these integrations. And in order to get to that stage of integration, it would take a lot of time. So this essentially provides us with a very quick way by which, since the data is already in ConnectWise or any of your PSAs, and if BrightGauge is basically integrated with your PSA, you can essentially start getting out all those graphics and reports that you want in BrightGauge, so that you have that portal for reporting. Of course, our reports and portals will continue to be there, but just that in case you want that single pane of glass, you have that single pane of glass. Okay, so this is this part. Now, basically moving on to the next thing. This basically, I have to give credit to this particular feature to Andrew Batasco.
Hey, Shiva.
Yeah,
We have there are a couple questions in the chat regarding the last update here. If you want to touch on these real quick before we pop into the next update here.
absolutely.
So we got a question from Chris. If you guys want to unmute yourself and just ask, feel free. This is an open forum for our partners, and we want you guys to feel free to just come in and voice your opinions, questions, concerns, thoughts, all that good stuff here. So we got a question from Chris. Is there a compliance check for if a device is running Windows 11 but does not meet the requirements used one of the workarounds to install Windows 11 anyways?
The compliance check runs on all Windows machines, including Windows machines that are running Windows 11. So essentially, it will basically flag those out as incompatible machines.
Okay.
So Adam, has the update been rolled out to self-hosted instances? No, Adam, that will essentially get rolled out tomorrow early morning. So you should start seeing them tomorrow. So that's essentially for the self-hosted instance. And then can you have the ticketing attached to the existing configs with the same name? Yes, it is attaching the configs. And Sean, you've been kind of one of the persons who's been talking about the configuration. So we've kind of taken all the requirements you gave us and essentially put it.
Cool. Good stuff.
So the next thing I wanted to touch about is basically one of the things that we've kind of got feedback from Andrew Watasco about, which is essentially kind of the whole piece about notifications and how it's very difficult to basically get notifications configured. So one of the things that we essentially kind of worked on is essentially how to make this simple. First is you don't need to go to a separate screen to essentially get this whole notifications configured. Second is we allow you to, like what is being shown here, you can essentially define a group of events or a specific event that you want to essentially kind of choose to be part of what is called an event set. And this event set, you can create as many event sets as you want based on the different companies that you're creating. And in this event set, what you do is once you get this particular event set, then you can essentially kind of go in and create what is called an integration profile. So what is an integration profile? It's a setting for a particular PSA, say, for example, for a group of companies. So here you can define what is the service board, what is the source name that you want to set it up with, what are the statuses, right? And what are the service type, subtype values that you want for this particular ticket when it's created. So once you kind of create all of these values, these are essentially again created as profiles. So one person can have multiple profiles associated with this. So in version 1, we had the ability to create only one profile, but now we essentially give you the ability to create multiple profiles, right? So once this profile is created, you can then essentially get into, when you're basically doing a company mapping, what you can essentially do is that you can associate this company with a ConnectWise company, and then you can essentially, once you do this, you can essentially set up what event set you want this notification to be with, right? And this works across all the PSAs and all of the integrations. So you can choose which event set over here, and then you can choose which integration profile you want to associate it with, and basically you're done. So you can essentially kind of create a notification rule right from here within the integration without having to go to a separate screen and basically fill up a whole bunch of forms. So you can reuse any of the settings that you have for any of the integration profiles or the event sets across all of the companies. So kind of made it extremely simple for all of you to essentially look at this. And at the same time, basically when you see the tickets in ConnectWise, you basically can, all the ticket IDs and the way that it works in terms of creating when basically a scan runs, this essentially will go figure out what are the things which essentially have to be remediated in this particular case. It creates the companies, and then it creates the tickets. And then as we just talked about, it'll attach the configurations in case configurations is enabled. And it will essentially come back and create the ticket in your PSA. And that will contain all the details based on the event sets that you've created. So for example, if it's remediation by product, you can see one ticket created per product and all the assets basically inside that particular product. And you have chosen whether it has to be an external note or an internal note. And based on that, essentially, it will create this whole thing. And you can basically see all the ticket IDs updated on the portal. So this essentially is the full cycle management for the notification rules and basically making sure that you have complete ticketing, a complete cycle of ticketing taken care of. This essentially will be going live this week. And this is basically a simplification. All of these features were available earlier, but basically it was very difficult to set this whole thing up. And so we've taken feedback from Andrew, and thanks to Andrew Watasco for kind of staying on us while we were basically putting this together. And now we have all the details. So the template is also in there. So you can basically modify what details you want in here, but we essentially have put all the details in there, including the evidence, the asset name, the version, all of those pieces, and the remediation for it. So you can essentially have these tickets assigned to various people and automatically basically being taken care of. So this is basically a kind of the feature that you folks asked for, and we basically have made this simpler and basically more approachable for most people. So the next, so now that this is made simple, my only request is I would request all of you to kind of configure this ticket creation, because it really becomes a way to audit and show your customers that you're essentially doing a good job in terms of taking care of security. The next one is that a lot of folks asked us for when you're doing Active Directory role assignments, they want to essentially see how many people are in a particular Active Directory role. So now we have that user counts in each of the Active Directory roles, which are basically displayed right there. Of course, you can see who are the members of the roles too, so that's already there. There was a request for having a risk scorecard dashboard at a global level, which shows the risk scorecard across all of the companies in there. So that essentially is also available right now. So you can see this in the global overview dashboard. You can basically see the risk score across all the companies. And then we have when we have the global remediation plan, one of the things which was there is that you just had kind of this remediation details button, and you had to go in and see how many companies and assets were impacted because of this. So one of the things that was requested was that I want to be able to see all the companies and the number of assets that have been affected by something, so that we can essentially quickly act upon the things that are most critical. So for example, here, Adobe Flash Player 9 needs to be removed. That basically, if you essentially operate on these 43 assets, then you basically remove a large chunk of risk that is basically in there. So this essentially has also been made live right now. And then you have the reports on all the agents. So this was one of the requests from people saying that I want a list of all the agents that have been installed. So that available as PDF Word and this thing. And then we also have the ability for you to, we didn't have this capability, and I'm sorry, we should have had it earlier, but essentially each user can go in and change his own password from here. So basically that feature is now available. The other thing is that when we're talking about asset reports, one of the things that we saw very frequently was people wanted to know which of the assets essentially have the RDP port open. And so this again has been added into the asset report. So you can essentially see that there is another additional tab called RDP assets, which essentially allows this to happen. And then the other thing is that when you did a remediation plan at a company and a global level, one of the things that was asked for is being able to filter out based on the platform, which is, I want to see all things that apply to Windows, all things that apply to Mac, or all things that apply to Cisco. So those filters are now basically made available, and this is also basically live in your instances. We have a new report which talks about all the newly discovered assets in the last 48 hours. This again was a request that's been that was pending for some time, and we basically kind of have made this available at this point of time. And then also Active Directory login failures in the last 30 days. So this is another report that's basically available to you. So you can essentially get a report of all the Active Directory login failures in the last 30 days. So the other thing is that when we did lightweight agent scans for a company, it went and scanned all the lightweight agents. In this particular case, you can choose a specific lightweight agent scan and get them scanned from a global perspective too. So this is another feature that we essentially got added now. Now, these were all basically the features that got added and basically will be released. Either they've been released or they're getting released by the end of this week. So this is essentially all development that's completed. So one of the next pieces that I'm going to talk about is what we're basically working on next, because based on some requests which have been coming in from Slack and other places, which is basically PII scanning. So we've implemented a PII scan. Again, it's a module that we've developed ourselves as an extension to the OS query that we use, which essentially scans for credit card information, driver's license, passport, name, address, phone number, any date of birth, national ID, patient health information, license plate information. Email address, we basically were debating whether we should really kind of show any value to email addresses, because I think there are enough of places to get email addresses, but if you all think it's of value, then we'll continue down this path. But I think that will just be a huge amount of data that we'll collect, and basically we may not yield much of value, and essentially bank account numbers if we essentially are able to see it. Now, how is this going to work? There, essentially you'll be able to add specific folders on machines that you want to scan. You can add databases, which is like MySQL database, MS SQL databases, Elasticsearch, and Postgres for phase one, which with their credentials, where you will scan all the tables and basically see if any of this information is available unencrypted. You can add any file shares that are there on the network. And basically, in the case of file, you have file shares, you will have to basically provide us with credentials by which we can access the file shares. The question is that, would you want to essentially have a complete scan of specific endpoints or all endpoints? Because this would require lightweight agents on all of the endpoints to be installed. And we would basically, again, when we run the scan, it basically means that it is built to scan the entire file system, and there's a lot of processing that's going to be involved. So are the machines capable of taking this kind of load is one thing that we'll have to basically kind of get feedback from all of you. In phase two, we'll essentially be doing the cloud credential store validation and cloud specific databases, where we're talking about Office 365, SharePoint drives, and OneDrive, etc. So looking at data in all of those pieces. And so we are looking for feedback in like, how do we limit the resources? PI scanning in each file can be intensive, at least in the initial stages. So how long can you wait for an initial scan to complete? Subsequent scans, we'll do incremental scans, so it should be okay. But the initial scans can be very intensive, especially if you're doing just an assessment. We're going to basically be ignoring all Windows folders unless you want to explicitly scan them. We're going to be incorporating PDF, normal, and OCR scanning. That's essentially going to be any document, Excel, and PowerPoint files, and basically text files. These essentially are going to be kind of the scope of what we're going to be scanning, at least in phase one. So we wanted feedback from you in terms of, is this sufficient, not sufficient? Is there anything that we're missing in this particular piece? And what we would output at the end of this whole piece is basically a data protection plan, saying that these are all the pieces of data that need to be protected, and basically a PI data report. One of the things that we are kind of worrying about in terms of, while the technical aspect of it is okay, there is, how do we protect the PI information that we've discovered, right? So we basically pull that data, we put it in a database, and then we've generated a report out of it. Now, this is PI information, whether it's at the customer end or our end, it is basically PI information, so it needs to be secured. So we can encrypt it. But how do we ensure that the customer feels comfortable that we do not have a copy of the data once the report is provided? So, because this has sensitive data, right? Like, for example, there is credit card information. Now, I'm pulling the data and showing you a report saying that I found this credit card, I can mask it, I can do all of those pieces, but I still have that data with me. So how do we essentially give people the comfort that this platform basically is handling this data well, and how do we basically take this forward? And second is that for trials, we want to essentially kind of mask the bulk of the PI scanning data, because we don't want anybody who comes in and basically just spins up the platform for a trial and then tries to use it to basically extract the PI data from its customers, and then after that uses it for some negative purposes. So that's essentially kind of what we are thinking about. But what we would really like is basically your feedback on this whole thing, and saying, how do we basically kind of go about these aspects that I've basically kind of outlined.
So we got a couple of comments here in chat from Tim, Justin, and Chris here. So Tim's asking, is there a plan to do a one-time lightweight agent scan for vulnerability and PII reports?
Yeah, specifically, that's a sales question where I wouldn't want to have a full agent installed and doing full scans of the network. This is a hey, as part of a quick audit network assessment for a sales call, I want you to download and run this exe, and I'll give you the report on the kind of vulnerabilities that we could find if we were in the whole network.
Yeah, so I think we can provide that, Tim. The only thing is that one-time lightweight scan is basically just on a single PC, right? Usually,
yes, that's fine.
Usually, don't you have to do this on an entire network? So a single PC is sufficient?
Yeah, this is basically getting in and getting onto the main contact's computer just so they can show them, hey, there are vulnerabilities here. This is a small window into what we can provide in a larger scenario if you hire us.
Okay, so Tim, would this experience be something like this, where essentially I give you like a kind of a page where you say, just download the agent, they basically double click on it, it runs, and then basically publishes a report, and then you share your screen and say, this is your report. So, but this is where it is. Would it
Yeah,
be
that's exactly what I'm looking for. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be immediate. It could, run it later in the day or make sure that it's running on low resources, and I can download the report later when we're meeting for it. But yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for.
Yeah, I can get that into the next sprint and work on this, Tim. That's not a problem.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So the second, Justin, is I would like the option to scan only certain endpoints. Yes, Justin. And Justin, how would you basically like to choose those endpoints? Would it be more like, would it be okay if he essentially gave you a tag and you essentially would apply those tags to those endpoints, and then after that, we would just scan those endpoints which have the tags?
Yeah, tagging's fine. The ability to, because there's sometimes you have like a file server with 2 terabytes of file data, like that'll kill the machine, and I don't feel as if the scan would actually complete. So therefore, if I can, exclude certain systems from that scan, that would, let's say I know I only want to scan the accounting PCs or the finance PCs or the HR PCs, like that way I don't have to scan the whole environment. I've used another product in the past, not Rapid Tools, but a different one. And the scans worked well, but yeah, I mean, the scans would die if the data volume was too large, or I didn't need to scan them all. It just became problematic. So the ability to scan individual PCs would definitely be a benefit in my eyes.
Perfect. So we've already basically programmed it that way. So you can schedule one or more resources where you want to do the scan, and you can choose, if you choose an entire array of resources, then it essentially does it in batches of like 5 right now. And as we get more feedback, we may increase the batch size, but right now that's how we do it. Chris, you basically said complete scans of specific endpoints would be useful. I won't want it as a scheduled scan, but very helpful for on-demand scans. Yes, we basically provide it as on-demand scans and schedules. What would be basically like, would anybody want this as a scheduled scan to run, or the PII scanning, or would you basically prefer it to be just an on-demand scan?
I say on demand.
Perfect. I ran PI scans in the past using a different product and clients, and I was worried about vendor having a copy of the data. It was just that I was basically being a little worried about the fact that we also are handling that data, so we need to be careful about it. A signed BA would be helpful. Yes, I think so. But would it be sufficient if we essentially gave the file name and type and don't give the actual data, as Tim and Chris and others have mentioned? Because the only thing which I would worry about is that the next question, when you give them a file name and this thing, is that what was on that, like show me what you found on that PC, right? Because we just going to basically kind of give it to them, and then they have to actually go to that endpoint and pull the data, and then they would know what the data is. So if that is an okay model, then we're fine with that. But just that, will it solve the purpose that you're looking for? So what is the data that you found on that machine, right? So you don't have the actual data that is in there. So I think a lot of people are basically saying file name and location will be sufficient. So we'll go with that for the initial run. In case we get any pushback, then we'll essentially kind of see how we need to add this data. Will PII scanning require opt-in like patching? Yes, then PII scanning will require opt-in. It'll exactly be like patching, where you essentially enable it on a per company basis. You opt in and then you basically decide to use it. Justin, this basically is right now in development. So we're expecting that in the week of Jan 20th, we'll essentially kind of release a beta version of this feature. And then post that, we will essentially, once people are happy with it, then we will go into general availability.
Thank you.
The only other question that Mike had basically mentioned is that what about passwords stored in files, right? So passwords basically is a little tricky piece, right? Because if a password is stored, a password could be any string, whatever, right? And there might just be too many false positives if we essentially kind of look for passwords in files. That's our only worry. The only way to basically make sure that we can search for any passwords that are essentially in our database, where we basically used a certain set of passwords, we can try to see if those passwords are anywhere. But just wildcard searching for passwords, because anything could be used as a password, becomes a little difficult. Yep, Dennis. So we basically will provide the format of the data that actually matched in that particular case. So I think we've gone through all the questions. Dennis, I think we already basically implemented the feature of deleting bulk tags. If it is not on the portal, I will get back to you on a timeline, but my belief is that it's already live. Swami is on the call. Swami, bulk tag deletion we already implemented, right?
Yes, sir.
It's already implemented. So Dennis, I'll just create a video and send it across to you. Chris, yes, we can do a deep dive session on custom dashboards. We are working on basically simplifying that too, but I will basically do a deep dive session on how to create your own set of dashboards.
Yeah, I think it'd actually be a pretty good idea to do a deep dive on both the dashboards and the reporting to sort of figure it out, how we can optimize the reporting and dashboards for, you know, the views and the statistics that you all find most useful to talk about with your clients.
So James, two parts of this. difference between cloud and self-hosted. So self-hosted, from a functionality perspective, you basically are on par with whatever features we basically deliver on the cloud, we deliver on-prem also. The only thing is that right now we, in case you are going to scale beyond anywhere between 2,000 to 2,500 assets, then on the cloud, you basically on the cloud, basically it auto scales itself. Whereas in self-hosted, you will have to basically kind of use us to essentially deliver that scaled configuration, which means that, for example, your Elasticsearch has to essentially have a cluster. So we have to create a cluster of 3 machines and then put all of the update all of them and put them into sync. So all of that work that needs to happen, basically in on-prem, it becomes a little difficult to essentially kind of coordinate that. So if you're basically looking at anything beyond like 2,000 assets, then we usually suggest that you come to the cloud-based model. From a the pro and con, basically simple. Cloud essentially allows you to scale the business and you don't need to worry about outages, etc. In the case of self-hosted, you are responsible for your infrastructure, and it's a good thing. It might be a bad thing also. It's a good thing because it's in your control completely. It could be a bad thing if essentially if that node goes down, then basically you're not able to provide the service. Whereas in the cloud, we have built in a level of resilience so that these can essentially be working. So Tim, in terms of what's the best way for my text to stay up to date with all the feature changes, that absolutely we will. We are basically coming up with 2 or 3 things. One is essentially in product, we are essentially integrating with another product to essentially give kind of walkthroughs of any new features that are delivered. Second is we'll also have pop-ups that come up every time you log in, which essentially will say what are the new features that are available. I will also make it a point to, since we have the new email automation in place, we can actually send kind of like maybe a weekly or bi-weekly update on all the changes that are basically happening with every this thing. But we do have release notes with every features that we push out. So I will basically send out a note with where you can look at the release notes for each release, and then we'll also make that visible in the portal. And then Cyber Essentials compliance piece, Chris, absolutely, folks, we are absolutely open to whatever needs to be done for Cyber Essentials compliance. We've done whatever we thought was sufficient, but what we would like to really hear is that what are we missing? What do we have to do? So we can do this on this call, which is okay, but if you want us to basically do a call with all of you folks basically in UK, I'm happy to create a separate call and basically do that there too. So it's whatever would work for you works for us. Adam, those mails basically will go out today. We are just waiting on one final clarification, the approval. So by tomorrow, you will essentially see this in your mailbox. Perfect. So I think we're all caught up for now. So Peter, you have anything that you want to basically bring up? The floor is yours.
No, I'm you know, I just wanted to say you know, glad to have you guys all here. I think it's, you know, this partner call was a really kind of a centerpiece of this business, and we want to continue to do these calls with you guys on a recurring weekly basis. You know, we might not have product updates every week, but you know, we're always wanting to leave this as an open forum for you guys to talk about anything that we as a company can do better, whether that's, you know, the product itself, the operations surrounding the business, you know, support, the contact us page. So, you know, anything you guys find that we can improve on, we want to make this an open forum for you guys to talk about that. And yeah, I look forward to bringing these calls back and getting back to what really made this company a great success, and then taking this into the future. So next week's call, I think maybe it'd be a good idea, since we haven't had these calls in a while, to do sort of like an open town hall type forum to just talk about, you know, the overall business, where we can improve. You know, like Tim had mentioned earlier, you know, how can he get his techs the updates without sending them an hour-long call? You know, things like that. You know, how can we improve the operations? Because I think we have a great tool, and I want to build operations around the tools so that we are fully supporting you guys and helping you guys succeed. But that's everything from me.
Perfect. So thanks, Peter, and thank you, everyone. And US East 2, there is a node that is essentially failing 1 out of 3 checks. So essentially, the team is looking at it along with the AWS folks. So I think in the next 5 to 7 minutes, everything will be back to normal. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.